Kimi K3 is here, and honestly, this one is kind of shocking. It didn't just catch up with Opus and GPT 5.5, it caught up with Fable and GPT 5.6. The open models are not as far behind as we first thought. Let's take a look. Let's start with our announcement. Kimi K3 is a 2.8 trillion parameter model built on Kimi delta attention and attention residuals with native vision capabilities and a 1 million token context window. It's the world's first open 3 trillion class model designed for frontier intelligence across long horizon coding, knowledge work, and reasoning. On all of the benchmarks that they show in this blog, Kimi K3 is either trailing behind Fable and GPT 5.6 Soul, or even beating them on some of the other areas. Like, this is such a crazy jump that I don't think many people predicted. Obviously though, this is on their own benchmarks, so let's take a look at artificial intelligence and their third-party ones, and I'm happy to say the results pretty much match up. On this benchmark, we can see that around 80% of you watching this aren't subscribed, so go ahead and click that subscribe button if you like to stay up to date with all things software development and AI. On to the real benchmarks though, starting out with the coding index, it scores a 76.2 on this. That is 0.3 points behind Fable 5, and is slightly more than GPT 5.5, more than Opus 4.8, and more than GPT 5.6 Luna, and it only slightly loses to GPT 5.6 Soul and Terra. Like, look at this leap they have made from their last model. If we then take a look at the agentic index, it's the same story. It's third here, losing only to Fable and Soul, but that is seriously still impressive, and you're used to this by now, but it's the exact same on the intelligence index as well. So even the third-party benchmarks confirm that this model is awesome. Sadly, we don't yet have the deep SWE results as of recording this, but if we take a look at our own benchmarks, you can see that it came third again. Like, this model just seems too good to be true. The only downsides that I can find with this model is that it is a little bit expensive. Unless you have a supercomputer in your house, I don't think you're going to be running this one locally. So if you go through their API, it's actually priced at $3 for a million input tokens and $15 for a million output tokens. This is quite a big step up from Kimi K2.6, and it's around the same price as Sonnet 5 when that discount goes away, but it is cheaper than Fable 5, Opus, and GPT 5.6. API pricing also isn't everything, so if we take a look at it in practice with the cost per task here, it's actually similar to GPT 5.6 Soul, and it's about half the price of Opus 4.8, and of course it's cheaper than Fable and Sonnet 5. So it is competitive with those frontier closed models, but for those of you that love open models because they're a little bit cheaper, this model probably won't be for you. GLM 5.2 is the second best option here, and it's half the price. It's also not the fastest model ever, but to me, it seems fairly competitive for this level of intelligence. Overall, it's honestly pretty hard to have anything negative to say about this model, so let's just jump in and see some of my local testing. The first test that I put these models through was creating me a complete Formula 1 racing game in Three.js that's just all in one index.html, and this one is Kimi K3 going through OpenRouter, but I also tested it in Kimi Code, their CLI, just to see if the harness does change anything. You can see down here that it thought for 14 minutes before it started, and overall it took it 35 minutes to make this Three.js web app, and it took $1.24 in API tokens. And the results I got back are pretty impressive. Obviously this has no access to any external assets, so it's doing its best at creating these models, but the track does work. We have our AI racers, and they seem to be able to go around the track. You can see the barriers actually work, so I can't clip through them. Our position is updating. We have our map updating. We have our current time updating, as well as the laps as well. I have done a full lap and confirmed that that all works. So it's a pretty good result for what Kimi K3 gave us. As I said, I also tested out the different harness. So this is Kimi K3, but in Kimi Code. And this one I would say looks a little bit nicer. It's done a better job with the assets, although that is just a style guide. There's a bit of lag there with those models, but the handling is a little bit better. The controls are still inverted, and that actually seems to be a pattern in a lot of these Three.js applications for some reason. But again, all of this handles really well, and it has features like going off track is going to slow me down. And yeah, it's done a pretty impressive job as well. But now let's compare this to the frontier models. We have Fable 5 here in Claude Code that was on max, and it took 44 minutes to make my Three.js application. Then we also have GPT 5.6 Soul on max as well, and this one took 18 minutes. This is the result that Fable gave me, so we have Fable GP here, and I would say that it looks slightly nicer maybe, but again, all of this is just a stylistic choice, and the controls aren't actually inverted in this one. There's also a bit of camera wobble, which I do think is a nice style, and again, everything seems to be working in this one like all of the others. I've tested doing a full lap of this, as hard as it is. We do also have some collisions here, as you can see, but yeah, everything seems to be working, and it's pretty comparable to what Kimi K3 gave us. It's a similar story with GPT 5.6 Soul. As you can see, we have a working game here, although I will note that the road here is grass. It didn't actually render that in, and everything does seem to be working. The controls are inverted on this one as well, and we also have a few backward assets. I don't know why these models seem to like doing that. The only one that didn't was Fable, and also the track here does get a bit jumbled up, so this is actually the only one that didn't make me a working track. To add in one final comparison, I also checked what GLM 5.2 would give me, as it's the next best open model, and this one thought for 5 minutes and 58 seconds, although it didn't finish it in one prompt. There was actually a few bugs, so I had to go back with another prompt. Even then, when I did finally get the game running, you can see that there's a lot of bugs in this one. Firstly, we don't start the right way on the track, and there isn't really a track to begin with. And also, it just looks a lot worse than the other ones. So there is a bit of a step up when we go up to Kimi K3. Moving on to test 2 though, I asked for a personal finance management dashboard. This is going to build the full stack application with a front end and a back end. The only thing I said I didn't want is auth, and I also asked it to seed some data. I did this one again in OpenRouter with K3 and then also in Kimi Code. So this one is in OpenRouter. And you can see in total, this one took 56 minutes to make me the application and also cost me $1.30. This is the result they gave me though, and honestly, I can't really complain about this. This is exactly what I asked for. It is a personal finance management dashboard. I'd say it looks really nice as well, and we have all of the features like the extra pages here, and I have checked that adding funds and sending money, it all works, so it's done a very good job. Now, I'm also always curious to see what tools it used to do the task, as I don't actually give it any instructions on what stack to use in the prompt. You can see for the front end here, it went with React and React DOM. It didn't actually use any router or anything like that. It actually built its own view system, so I probably would have preferred that it used something like React Router, TanStack, or Next.js. And then on the back end, it also built out its own server. I believe this one is using Express.js, as we can see down here. But then it also built its database just using a JSON file. Didn't use any SQLite or anything like that, or Drizzle, which I probably would have liked to see if we were to scale this app in the future. But again, obviously me knowing that, I could have given that in the prompt, but I always like to see what these will pick as their default. This is a result that I actually got using K3 via Kimi Code, and you can see this one is actually a bit simpler. It's only one page and it doesn't have our sidebar. Again, all of the features are working and it has a pretty similar look to what we got out of OpenRouter. Looking at the code though, I do actually prefer what Kimi Code gave us here with K3. It's got a pretty similar front end where it just uses React and no routing library, but the server did actually use a database. You can see it's built in Express here. We do actually have a finance database, and it's actually using Node SQLite. Now, if we compare this to the frontier models again, this one is Fable 5 in Claude Code. You can see it worked for 56 minutes on that max effort. And then I also have GPT 5.6 Sol Max, where it thought for 31 minutes to make the application. Here's what Fable 5 gave us, and honestly, it's a pretty similar design. I mean, there's not much more you can actually do with a personal finance dashboard, and all of the features do work in here. It's actually gone with a bit of a different style for the fonts, which I've seen Fable and Opus do quite a lot lately. They seem to be retraining it to move away from some of those previous AI looks that they had, and they're building in a new AI look, and this seems to be the one they're picking. I'd say these charts are actually a little more useless than what we got out of Kimi K3, but overall it looks pretty similar and it works basically the same. Even the code is pretty similar. You can see it chose React for the front end and it didn't actually use a router either. It wrote its own. And then also in the database, it did successfully use a database properly. So we're using NodeSQL in this one as well. And for the actual server, it's just running Express 2. Moving on to GPT 5.6 Sol though, this one is a bit of a weird one. It's definitely my favorite design out of the lot, and again, all of the features are working. Let me know if you agree that this is the best design, but the weird part is in the code. This is definitely the most complete application code that we have seen in these examples. It actually built out a full Next.js application, and it used Drizzle just as I would, and it used Next.js as well for the front end as well as the server. But the part I find a little bit weird is that it chose to host it on Cloudflare, which isn't odd by itself, but it also used for Next. And it's not necessarily that I wouldn't recommend that, I just think it's a little bit untested, and it's pretty new, which shows that they're actually pushing GPT 5.6 Sol to use this. And I can only speculate as to why, but it seems it might be because that's how that ChatGPT sites actually work. You can see here, it actually decided to host this for me on that ChatGPT site feature, even though I didn't ask it to. Personally, I don't really like that very much when I'm coding an application. I don't want it to host it for me. I'd prefer to handle all of that myself, but I could have asked that in the prompt. But I kind of would prefer that I have to ask it to host it instead of the other way around. The final result I have here is GLM 5.2, and this one's done a pretty similar thing to what Kimi K3 did in Kimi Code, where it's just built this single page. But again, all of the features work, and I do think this design is pretty nice. GLM 5.2 actually took 15 minutes to do this, and you can see it cost me $1.11. As for the actual code, GLM 5.2 chose to go down the Next.js route as well, which I do actually like, but it did build out its own store instead of using a database, so all of this is just in memory in JavaScript. So from my quick test there, I think Kimi K3 does stand up with Fable and GPT 5.6 Sol and live up to the hype that the benchmarks are giving it. And honestly, it's getting quite hard to show you just how powerful these models are in a video demonstration. You tend to have to use them over a course of a week in a production code base to actually see the quality of the code. If you have any ideas for tests that I can actually show off in a video that would actually put these models through a hard test, let me know in the comments down below. I do also want to show off some of the examples that they had in their tech blog. You can see Kimi K3 built this game here, but did have another tool to actually generate these assets, so the cowboy and the horse weren't generated by K3, they were gotten elsewhere. You can see it's done a very good job of this in 3GS, and the other thing that's crazy is this chip design one. You can see as an early proof of concept, Kimi K3 designed a chip to serve a nano model built on its own architecture. In a single 48-hour autonomous run, K3 built, optimized, and verified the chip using open source tools. So hopefully you've seen that this model is absolutely awesome, and it's definitely going to be a bit of a hit to these frontier closed labs, or at least it will be when they actually drop the weights. They haven't dropped them yet, but they do plan on doing so I hope we see them very soon. What do you think about this? Did you expect a Chinese lab to catch up this quickly? And does this model appeal to you? Let me know in the comments down below, or either subscribe, and as always, see you in the next one.